Good afternoon, class. My name is Gamaliel Fernandez.
And my name is Pedro Salce, and today we're going to be talking about Friedrich Froebel. So sit back and enjoy the show. Some of you may be wondering who this gentleman is. Some of you may know him as the inventor of kindergarten, his garden for children. His name is Friedrich Froebel. Froebel was actually of German descent. He was the youngest of 6 kids, and they didn't have a mother because she had passed away during Froebel's birth. Therefore, he had to be raised by his father solely. His father was actually a pastor, and that heavily influenced most of Froebel's theories. Froebel actually had a mentor. His name was Pestalozzi. Froebel's theories are heavily derived from his mentors, but he felt that he still needed to add a lot more religion into them. What Froebel came up with was that the perfect way to educate a student was to promote free self-expression, the student's creativity, a lot of social participation, and motor expression. Essentially, Froebel believed that productivity and creativity went hand in hand with how much in harmony you were with God. Another one of his ideas was that playtime was a perfect way to help a child understand the world. You may have heard of Froebel's gifts. What these gifts were actually educational toys, and they were given to kids at a very young age to start nurturing their sense of self-direction, and also nurture their understanding for science and math. Now, some of the gifts that Froebel came up with consisted of the first being a set of balls that were attached to a string. These balls were made out of wool, so they could be squished and molded into different shapes, but eventually they would come back to their original shape. This gift was intended to be given to very young children. Froebel's intention was that through holding, dropping, rolling, swinging, hiding, and revealing the balls, the children may acquire knowledge of objects, movement, speed, and time, as well as color and contrast. Another gift consisted of 4 wooden objects. In these 4 wooden objects, you could find 2 cubes, 1 cylinder, and 1 sphere. They all had holes drilled in them so they could be hanged. These wooden blocks were not painted at all or stained. They were simply all the same color. Froebel thought that this would help children observe the similarities and also the differences of these blocks. They would observe how some blocks can move smoothly and others would be rough to move. This would later set the educational foundations for their physics education.
To summarize gifts 1 to 6, there are 3-dimensional objects that could be seen, touched, moved, and transformed. These were intended to help the children understand the physical world. Objects 7 to 9 are 2-dimensional objects such as the faces of cubes, triangles, and spheres, as well as lines and dots that could be connected.
Now, in his gift number 10, he would bring his gifts from 1 through 9 together. What he would do is that he would provide children with the framework for the actual 3D object. By using only 2-dimensional objects, the students would be able to put them together and end up creating a 3-dimensional object. This was, as Froebel thought, the best way to teach a student about geometry at an early age. These toys can still be found in various retail stores, and I'm pretty sure some of you have played with these at one point or another. Nowadays, in Japan, children are still growing up with Froebel's gifts. That is one way that Froebel is still impacting today's education. Now, for the last 10 gifts, these weren't actually described by Froebel himself. Instead, these were a series of gifts that parents had seen Froebel use in his everyday lectures, and therefore they thought they should add them to the list. A very important point is that Froebel would actually be ashamed of these last 10 items being called gifts. As he saw them, he preferred for them to be called occupations. The difference between a gift and an occupation was that a gift would always return to its original shape, no matter what the student did to it. Now, an occupation would be something as paper that you would fold, or you would cut, or color, which would never come back to its original shape. But as we all know, money plays a big factor in education, and what people decided to do was to include those last 10 items as gifts because they could sell more like that. The way Froebel saw his gifts was not the way that the educators back then saw them. They saw them as a way to make a lot of money. They would then be able to sell a set of 20 gifts for an outstanding price. Later on, after his death, his gifts began to be used in the wrong way. Teachers would start using them as busy work or as rewards for students, or they would even have the audacity to tell students exactly how to play with the toys, which was something that Froebel never intended. Froebel intended these toys to be used as a sample so that parents would go out and not have to buy these, but actually find them in a nature walk, in their household, or even in busy streets. And Froebel thought that like that, the students would be able to learn even when they're not attending kindergarten.
Froebel founded the Play and Activity Institute and gave birth to the word kindergarten in 1837. The main goals would be to help stimulate imagination and develop motor and physical skills with songs, games, stories, and crafts. He thought that kindergarten teachers should not be authoritarian, instead just be guidelines and let students learn on their own. The Montessori Academy to this day still follows Froebel's ideals. The first public kindergarten school in the United States was located in St. Louis in 1873, exactly 36 years after the first kindergarten was opened in Germany. Children in the United States were taught about manners, moral habits, cleanliness, politeness, obedience, promptness, and self-control that would prepare them for elementary school. Statistics show that the beginning of the 20th century showed that about 6% of all 4 to 5-year-olds were enrolled in kindergarten. In 2005, 3.9 million children were now enrolled in kindergarten, which is the same as 74% of all children.
Many scholars, to this day, still believe that Froebel's methods, ideas, and gifts are the most complete set of guidelines to understanding early childhood education. Froebel's method actually intended for students to begin forming outlines of things that they would encounter later on in their school careers. If it wasn't for that outline, students would probably be lost when they were confronted by new and meaningless things. As Froebel saw it, students were not just empty buckets where you can just toss in all the information and expect them to understand it completely. He wanted students to find the connections between the objects and understand the logic behind them, instead of just trying to memorize paragraphs.